The phone rang at 11:30 on a Tuesday night, and when I saw my mother's name flash across the screen, my blood turned cold. 3 years of complete silence, and now she was calling me sobbing so hard I could barely understand her words. "Brantley, please, you have to come home. The family needs you. We found out about everything about California about your success. Why didn't you tell us? We're so proud of you, sweetheart. Tyler's in trouble again, and your father, he's sick. And we just discovered you've been gone this whole time. We thought you were just being quiet upstairs." Growing up in suburban Cleveland, I learned early that love in my house was a limited resource, and Tyler consumed most of it. My parents Robert and Linda Morrison had their golden child, and I was simply the afterthought who happened to share their last name. The pattern started when Tyler was born 3 years after me. Suddenly, every conversation revolved around his latest achievement, his newest need, his smallest discomfort. When Tyler took his first steps, my parents threw a party. When I learned to ride a bike without training wheels, nobody noticed because Tyler had a runny nose that day. By middle school, the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Tyler played travel baseball, which meant weekends consumed by tournaments in distant cities, hotel stays, and expensive equipment that drained our family's finances. I played chess for the school team and won the regional championship, but the ceremony fell on the same day as Tyler's playoff game. My parents chose Tyler's game naturally. "Brantley understands," my mother would say whenever these conflicts arose. "He's always been so independent, so mature for his age. Tyler needs more support right now." Independence wasn't a choice for me, it was survival. High school brought new levels of abandonment, disguised as family priorities. Tyler's grades were mediocre, but his baseball skills earned him attention from college scouts. My parents hired expensive batting coaches and spent weekends driving him to showcases across 3 states. Meanwhile, I maintained a 4.2 grade average, worked part-time at Romano's Pizza, and applied for academic scholarships entirely on my own. The night of my high school graduation, I sat alone in my cap and gown scanning the audience for familiar faces. My parents were at Tyler's playoff game in Columbus, 3 hours away. They'd promised to make it back in time, but Tyler's team went into extra innings, and they couldn't possibly leave him. "I'm sure you understand," my father had said over the phone during intermission. "This could be Tyler's shot at a college scholarship. Your graduation will be there regardless." I walked across that stage, accepted my diploma as valedictorian, and heard applause from my teachers and classmates' families. When the principal announced my full academic scholarship to Ohio State University, I stood alone while other graduates hugged their parents. College brought temporary relief from the constant comparison, but the financial reality of my family's priorities became undeniable. My parents had promised to help with expenses not covered by my scholarship, but those promises evaporated when Tyler needed a new car, specialized training equipment, or travel money for showcase tournaments. "We'll figure something out," my mother would say when I called about textbook money or lab fees. "Tyler's playing in a tournament the college scouts will be attending. If he gets a scholarship, it'll help the whole family." Tyler never earned that baseball scholarship. His grades were too low, his attitude too entitled, and his work ethic non-existent. But by the time that reality became clear, I'd already learned to depend on myself completely. I worked nights at Romano's Pizza, saving every dollar not spent on absolute necessities. While my classmates enjoyed typical college experiences, I delivered pizzas until 2 in the morning, then studied until dawn. My grades never slipped below a 3.8, but exhaustion became my permanent state. The summer before my senior year, Tyler was arrested for underage drinking and vandalism. The legal fees cost my parents $12,000 money that had been earmarked for my final year of college expenses. When I asked how I was supposed to pay for senior year, my father looked genuinely surprised. "You've always figured things out before," he said. Besides, Tyler's learned his lesson. This legal trouble could really hurt his future prospects. I took out student loans and picked up a third job cleaning office buildings on weekends. Tyler spent that summer playing video games and complaining about his court-mandated community service. Graduation day arrived again, and once more I sat alone. This time, Tyler had a hangover from a party the night before, and my parents couldn't leave him unsupervised in his delicate condition. I walked across the stage with my bachelor's degree in computer science summa cum laude, while my parents were at home making Tyler hangover soup. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I'd been secretly saving money for 2 years, working extra shifts and freelance web design projects. I had enough for a cross-country move and 3 months of survival money. While my parents slept, I packed my entire life into my beat-up Honda Civic and wrote a note explaining that I was moving to San Francisco to start my career. I left the note on the kitchen counter right next to the coffee maker, where they'd be sure to see it. Then I drove west toward a future where my worth wouldn't be measured against Tyler's constant needs. What I didn't know was that Tyler would spill beer on that counter the next morning, and my mother would clean it up without reading what she assumed was just another piece of trash. My carefully written goodbye explaining my decision and leaving my new contact information went straight into the garbage disposal. San Francisco hit me like a slap of cold reality wrapped in stunning beauty. The hills stretched endlessly upward, dotted with houses that cost more than my parents' entire neighborhood, while homeless encampments sprawled beneath freeway overpasses. I'd driven 2,400 miles chasing a dream, and my first week nearly sent me running back to Ohio. My Honda Civic became my temporary home in a Walmart parking lot in Daly City. I'd researched which locations allowed overnight parking and rotated between 3 different stores to avoid suspicion. Each morning, I'd wake up with my neck cramped from sleeping, across the front seats brush my teeth in gas station bathrooms, and shower at a 24-hour gym that cost me $30 a month I couldn't afford. Those first 2 weeks taught me resourcefulness I never knew I possessed. I lived on peanut butter sandwiches, bananas, and gas station coffee while hunting for both work and affordable housing. The tech world I'd dreamed of joining seemed impossibly distant when I couldn't even afford a decent shirt for interviews. My breakthrough came through desperation rather than strategy. While nursing a single coffee for 3 hours at a cafe in the Mission District, I overheard 2 guys complaining about their startup's website. Their developer had disappeared with half their payment, leaving them with broken code and a launch deadline approaching fast. "Excuse me," I interrupted, my heart pounding. I couldn't help overhearing, "I'm a web developer and I might be able to help." Marcus Chen and David Rodriguez looked skeptical until I showed them examples of sites I'd built during college. Within an hour, they'd hired me to fix their platform for $800, paid half up front. That $400 got me into a shared room in a house with 5 other struggling tech workers in the Sunset District. My first job came through a Craigslist ad for a morning shift barista position at Blue Bottle Coffee in Hayes Valley. The pay was minimum wage, but it covered my portion of rent and came with free coffee and day-old pastries. I worked 6 to noon, then spent afternoons building websites for small businesses and walking dogs for busy professionals through an app called Rover. Evenings belonged to education. I spent hours at the main library on Larkin Street, teaching myself advanced programming languages and studying emerging technologies. The library closed at 9. Then I'd return to the house and code until exhaustion forced me to sleep. Within 6 months, my freelance client base grew from desperate referrals to word-of-mouth recommendations. I specialized in helping restaurants optimize their online ordering systems, a niche that proved surprisingly lucrative as food delivery apps exploded in popularity. The work was tedious and detail-oriented, exactly the kind of project larger development firms found unprofitable. But I discovered something remarkable: restaurant owners were willing to pay premium prices for personalized service and quick turnaround times. While other developers chased flashy app ideas, I built practical solutions for real businesses with immediate needs. My big break came through pure accident. While delivering coffee to a tech meetup in Soma, I overheard a conversation about the inefficiencies of restaurant delivery logistics. Drivers waited unnecessarily long for orders. Restaurants struggled to coordinate multiple delivery services, and customers received cold food because of poor timing coordination. That night, I sketched out an idea for an app that would help restaurants better manage their delivery operations by predicting order times, optimizing driver dispatching, and coordinating between multiple delivery platforms. Instead of another app for consumers, this would be a behind-the-scenes tool for restaurant management. I spent 3 months building the prototype while maintaining my other jobs. My housemates thought I'd lost my mind coding until 4 in the morning and surviving on energy drinks and determination. But by spring, I had a working application called FlowKit that could genuinely solve real problems for restaurant owners. My first client was Antonio's, a family-owned Italian restaurant in North Beach, where I delivered coffee dozens of times. The owner, Giuseppe Rossi, was drowning in delivery coordination chaos and willing to try anything. Within a week of implementing FlowKit, his average delivery time improved by 18 minutes, and customer complaints dropped by 60%. Giuseppe's enthusiasm became my best marketing tool. He recommended FlowKit to other restaurant owners who recommended it to their friends who mentioned it to their suppliers. Within 6 months, I had 47 restaurants paying me $200 monthly for a service that was saving them thousands in efficiency improvements and customer satisfaction. Meanwhile, back in Ohio, my family continued their lives without questioning my unusual silence. Tyler had graduated high school with a 2.1 grade average and no prospects beyond community college. But instead of accepting responsibility, he blamed his failures on distractions and unfair treatment from teachers who obviously favored other students. I tried calling home once during this period on Tyler's birthday, thinking maybe family connection would feel different now that I'd found some success. The call went straight to voicemail and nobody returned it. I didn't try again. What I didn't know was that Tyler's problems were escalating beyond academic failure. His drinking had progressed from weekend parties to daily consumption, and his entitled attitude had earned him a reputation around Cleveland as someone to avoid. But my parents remained committed to protecting their golden child from consequences. The crisis came during my first anniversary in San Francisco, just as FlowKit was gaining real traction. I discovered through my high school friend Jake's Instagram that Tyler had been arrested for drunk driving and had totaled his car in the process. The photos showed a mangled Honda Accord wrapped around a telephone pole with Tyler somehow escaping serious injury despite being twice the legal limit. The arrest meant expensive lawyers, court fees, mandatory alcohol treatment, and thousands in fines. But what shocked me more was learning through social media that my parents had taken out a second mortgage on their house to cover these expenses. While I'd been struggling to afford ramen noodles and sleeping in my car, they'd been willing to risk their home to bail Tyler out of consequences. The irony was devastating. I'd worked 3 jobs to pay for college, while Tyler's mistakes consumed the family's financial resources. Now I was finally building something meaningful, but the family that had never supported my efforts was destroying their own stability to enable my brother's destructive choices. That night I made a decision that would define the next phase of my journey. Instead of letting anger consume me, I'd channel every emotion into making FlowKit bigger and better. I'd prove that success was possible without endless support, that independence could lead to achievement my family had never imagined. I just didn't realize yet how spectacularly that success would exceed even my own ambitious expectations. 2 years after launching FlowKit, my little restaurant management app had grown into something I'd never imagined possible. What started as a simple scheduling tool had evolved into a comprehensive platform that restaurants across California were calling essential for their operations. The growth happened gradually, then suddenly. Word-of-mouth recommendations led to inquiries from restaurant chains, which led to partnerships with food service distributors, which led to integration opportunities with major delivery platforms. Each new client brought unique challenges that forced me to expand FlowKit's capabilities, turning it into an indispensable business tool. By my third year in San Francisco, I was managing contracts with over 300 restaurants across 6 states. The $200 monthly fees had evolved into tiered pricing ranging from $500 to $3,000, depending on restaurant size and feature requirements. My one-person operation had grown into a team of 8 developers and customer service specialists operating from a converted warehouse space in the Mission District. The phone call that changed everything came on a foggy Tuesday morning in March. Jennifer Walsh from Hospitality Tech Solutions, a major restaurant technology company, wanted to discuss a potential acquisition. I assumed she meant a partnership or licensing deal, the kind of conversation I'd been having regularly with larger companies interested in FlowKit's capabilities. "Mr. Morrison," she said over coffee at a downtown cafe, "we're not interested in partnering with FlowKit. We want to buy it outright." The number she mentioned made my hands shake around my coffee cup. $12 million for a company I'd built in my spare time while delivering coffee and walking dogs. The offer included retention bonuses for my team, a 3-year consulting contract for me, and complete ownership transfer that would happen within 60 days. I spent 3 sleepless nights reviewing the offer with lawyers and financial advisors, people whose hourly rates would have covered my rent for months, just a few years earlier. Every professional I consulted said the same thing. This was an exceptional offer for a company my size and age. I'd be financially independent at 31 years old. The signing ceremony took place in a conference room overlooking the bay, with lawyers and executives whose suits cost more than most people's cars. As I signed the final documents transferring ownership of my creation for a sum that would change my life forever, I thought about calling my family to share the moment. I pulled out my phone and dialed home something I hadn't done in over 2 years. It rang 4 times before going to voicemail. My mother's voice, cheerful and familiar, invited me to leave a message. I hung up without speaking. That evening, I celebrated alone in my new penthouse apartment in Soma, looking out at the city lights while drinking champagne that cost more than I'd spent on food during my first month in California. The irony wasn't lost on me that my biggest achievement felt hollow because I had no one to share it with. The money changed everything and nothing simultaneously. I bought a Tesla Model S. Not because I needed a car, but because I could finally afford something that represented success. I invested in startups, traveled to conferences, and began angel investing in other entrepreneurs who reminded me of my younger self. But late at night in my empty apartment with its perfect view and expensive furniture, I'd still find myself wondering about the family that had never supported my dreams. Were they proud of Tyler's latest achievements? Did they ever wonder why I'd stopped calling? Meanwhile, back in Cleveland, my family was struggling with consequences I couldn't have imagined. Tyler's drunk driving arrest had been just the beginning of a downward spiral that was consuming their finances and emotional energy. The legal fees, treatment costs, and property damage claims had depleted their savings and forced my father to work overtime shifts at the auto parts factory. My mother had taken a night job stocking shelves at Walmart, something she'd never mentioned to her friends or neighbors. The second mortgage payments stretched their budget beyond breaking point, but Tyler's continued poor choices meant the expenses never stopped accumulating. Tyler himself had developed a gambling addiction alongside his drinking problem, a combination that drained money faster than my parents could earn it. He'd convinced them that each new debt was the last one, each new crisis was a temporary setback that just required one more financial rescue. The discovery of my success came through the most unexpected source imaginable. Tyler's ex-girlfriend Amanda was scrolling through Facebook when she saw a local news article about young entrepreneurs making their mark in Silicon Valley. The headline read, "Cleveland native sells startup for millions." And my photo accompanied a story about FlowKit's acquisition. Amanda immediately posted on Facebook, tagging several mutual friends. "Is this Brantley Morrison, who just bought that huge house in California, related to Tyler Morrison?" Didn't they have the same last name in high school? She included a link to a San Francisco Chronicle article featuring photos of my new apartment and details about the $12 million sale. The article mentioned my hometown, my college background, and my journey from pizza delivery to tech entrepreneur. My mother saw the post that evening while browsing Facebook during her break at Walmart. At first, she thought it was a coincidence, a different person with the same name, but the photos were unmistakably me older and more confident, but clearly her son. She spent the next hour Googling my name, finding interview articles, business profiles, and social media posts that painted a picture of success she'd never imagined possible. According to the internet, her son had been featured in technology magazines, spoken at conferences, and built a company from scratch while she'd been wondering why he was being unusually quiet. The realization hit her like physical pain. She rushed home and woke my father, showing him article after article about my achievements. Together, they climbed the stairs to my childhood bedroom for the first time in months, opening the door to find it exactly as I'd left it 3 years earlier. My bed was still unmade from the morning I'd left. My diploma leaned against the dresser where I'd placed it before packing. The note I'd written explaining my move to California was long gone, dissolved in the garbage disposal along with Tyler's spilled beer, but evidence of my absence was undeniable. That's when my mother called me, sobbing with the realization that they'd lost 3 years of their son's life without even noticing he was gone. But what she didn't know yet was that Tyler had played a much more active role in my disappearance than simple neglect could explain. The phone calls began immediately after my mother's shocking discovery, each one more desperate and manipulative than the last. She started with pure emotion, crying about how much she'd missed me and how proud the family had always been of my achievements. "Sweetheart, we always knew you were special." She sobbed during the second call. "We just wanted to give you space to spread your wings and succeed. We never wanted to hold you back with our small town limitations." The revisionist history was breathtaking. According to this new narrative, my parents had deliberately avoided contacting me because they believed their working class background might somehow interfere with my professional success. They'd been protecting me from their influence, not ignoring my existence. "Your father and I would talk about you all the time," she continued. "We'd wonder how you were doing out there in California building your empire. We were so proud, but we didn't want to bother you during such an important time in your career." I listened to these explanations with growing disbelief. The same people who'd missed my graduation because Tyler had a hangover were now claiming they'd been proudly following my career from a respectful distance. My father's approach was different, but equally transparent. His calls focused on practical matters, man-to-man, conversations about business and responsibility. He'd always been proud of my independence, he claimed, and wasn't surprised that I'd found success through hard work and determination. "Son, I always told your mother you'd make something of yourself," he said during a particularly memorable conversation. "You got the Morrison work ethic, the drive to succeed no matter what obstacles you face." But beneath these proud parent proclamations, I could hear the real agenda emerging. Tyler was in trouble again, serious trouble that required immediate and expensive intervention. The family needed help, and I was now in a position to provide it. "Tyler's been struggling lately," my father admitted during the third call. "This whole legal situation really knocked him off course. He's trying to get his life together, but he needs professional help, the kind that insurance doesn't cover." The specific request came during the fourth call. Tyler needed to enter a specialized rehabilitation facility that cost $50,000 for a 3-month program. It was his last chance at recovery, according to multiple doctors and counselors. The family had researched extensively and found the perfect place, but they couldn't afford the fees. "We've already mortgaged the house," my mother explained. "Your father's working double shifts, and I took that job at Walmart. But we're still $30,000 short, and Tyler can't wait much longer. The addiction is getting worse every day." The emotional manipulation was expertly crafted. They painted Tyler as a victim of circumstances, someone who'd lost his way, but could be saved with the right support. My success created an obligation to help family members who'd always believed in me, even if their support hadn't been obvious at the time. He looks up to you, my father said. Tyler always talked about his successful older brother, how proud he was that you were making something of yourself. He'd love to reconnect and maybe get some guidance from someone who's figured out how to succeed in this world. I wanted to believe these stories wanted to imagine that my family's love had been constant, even when their attention was elsewhere. But something felt fundamentally wrong about their explanations, inconsistencies, that nagged at my understanding of our shared history. The breakthrough came during a conversation with my mother about Tyler's current situation. She was describing his attempts to rebuild relationships and make amends for past mistakes when she mentioned his recent breakup with a girlfriend named Sarah. He's been so heartbroken about losing Sarah, she said. They'd been together for months talking about their future together. She's from a wealthy family, really successful. And Tyler thought he'd finally found someone who could appreciate his potential. Sarah, I asked. How did Tyler meet someone from a wealthy background? Oh, through social media, my mother replied casually. Tyler's been working on building his online presence, trying to project success to attract better opportunities. Sarah was so impressed with his lifestyle and business prospects. A chill ran down my spine. What kind of lifestyle was Tyler projecting online? Well, he's been sharing photos of success, nice cars, expensive restaurants. He wanted to show that he was worthy of someone like Sarah, someone who came from money. The pieces clicked together with horrifying clarity. Mom, what exactly has Tyler been posting on social media? Just success photos, sweetheart. Pictures of nice houses, fancy cars, business meetings. He's been trying to show potential employers and girlfriends that he's ambitious and successful. My blood turned cold as I realized the truth. Tyler hadn't just been pretending to be successful online. He'd been pretending to be me using my actual achievements to catfish an innocent woman named Sarah. My parents weren't just aware of this deception. They'd been actively helping him maintain the lie. Mom, I said slowly, where did Tyler get photos of nice houses and fancy cars? The silence on the other end of the line told me everything I needed to know. Tyler had been stealing my social media photos, my business success stories, and my identity to scam a woman out of her inheritance. My family hadn't just neglected me for 3 years. They'd been actively using my achievements to enable Tyler's criminal behavior. The betrayal was so complete, so devastating, that I couldn't speak for several seconds. My success earned through years of struggle and sacrifice had become Tyler's tool for exploitation and fraud. But the worst revelation was yet to come. I booked a red-eye flight to Cleveland that same night, not bothering to pack more than a carry-on bag. After 3 years of building my life in California, I was returning to Ohio with questions that demanded answers in person. The flight gave me 5 hours to prepare for confrontations I'd been avoiding my entire adult life. The rental car GPS led me through neighborhoods that had declined noticeably since my departure. Empty lots where houses once stood boarded up storefronts, and an overall sense of economic depression that I'd forgotten characterized much of Rust Belt America. But nothing prepared me for the shock of seeing my childhood home. A bright yellow foreclosure notice was taped to the front door, flapping in the March wind like a flag of surrender. The lawn was overgrown with weeds, the gutters sagged from accumulated debris, and several window screens had tiers that hadn't been repaired. This wasn't the well-maintained suburban house I'd grown up in. This was a property in clear distress. I knocked on the door rather than using my old key, feeling like a stranger returning to a place that no longer belonged to me. My mother answered after several long seconds, and the shock on her face confirmed that my unannounced arrival had caught them completely off guard. "Brantley," she gasped. "What are you doing here? Why didn't you call?" She looked older than her 53 years, with gray roots showing through hastily dyed brown hair and stress lines around her eyes that hadn't been there during my college graduation. Her Walmart vest hung over a faded t-shirt, and I realized I'd interrupted her getting ready for another overnight shift. "I came to see Tyler," I said simply. "We need to talk." My father appeared behind her, and the change in his appearance was even more startling. He'd lost at least 20 pounds, his face was gaunt, and his hands shook slightly as he reached out to embrace me. The robust factory worker I'd known was now a man aged beyond his 55 years by financial stress and family crisis. "Son, it's so good to see you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We've missed you so much." The house interior reflected the same decline as the exterior. Furniture I remembered from childhood was still present, but everything looked worn and neglected. The carpet needed replacing, the walls needed painting, and the general atmosphere was one of people who'd given up on maintaining appearances. "Where's Tyler?" I asked. My parents exchanged glances before my mother answered. "He's in his room. He's been having a hard time lately, sweetheart. Please be patient with him." Tyler's childhood bedroom had been converted into what could only be described as a shrine to his imagined success. The walls were covered with printouts of expensive cars, luxury homes, and business articles that had nothing to do with his actual life. His desk held multiple laptops and phones, and I could see social media profiles open on several screens. Tyler himself looked terrible. He'd gained significant weight, his hair was unwashed, and his eyes had the unfocused look of someone who'd been drinking despite the early afternoon hour. When he saw me standing in his doorway, his reaction was pure panic. "Brantley, what are you doing here? Nobody told me you were coming." "We need to talk, Tyler, right now." He scrambled to close laptop screens and hide his phones, but I'd already seen enough to confirm my suspicions. Multiple dating profiles were open, all using photos I recognized from my own social media accounts. Screenshots of my business articles were saved in folders labeled success stories and proof of wealth. "Tyler, we need to discuss Sarah." His face went completely white. "I don't know what you're talking about." "The woman you've been dating online for 6 months, using my photos and my business success to convince her you're a wealthy entrepreneur." The confession poured out of him in a desperate rush of justification and self-pity. Yes, he'd been using my photos, but only because he needed to project success to attract quality women. Sarah was perfect for him, intelligent and wealthy and kind, but she would never have looked twice at the real Tyler Morrison. "You don't understand what it's like," he said, tears streaming down his face. "You've always been the successful one, the smart one, the one who had everything figured out. I needed something to offer someone like Sarah, some way to prove I was worthy of her attention." The relationship had progressed beyond casual online dating. Tyler had been planning to meet Sarah in person, telling her he was flying to Chicago for business meetings related to his restaurant technology company. He'd purchased plane tickets using credit cards in my father's name and had been planning to maintain the deception face-to-face. "Sarah thinks I'm coming to discuss a potential investment in her family's restaurant chain," he admitted. "She's bringing $50,000 in cash to the meeting because I told her about an exclusive investment opportunity." I felt physically sick. Tyler wasn't just catfishing for attention or validation. He was planning to commit fraud that would destroy an innocent woman's life. And he'd been financing this deception with debt that was bankrupting our parents. "Tyler, do you understand that this is criminal fraud? You're planning to steal $50,000 from someone who trusts you. It's not stealing," he shouted. "I was going to pay her back when my life turned around. This was just temporary, just until I could get back on my feet and become the person she deserves." My parents had been listening from the hallway, and their silence told me they'd known about Tyler's plan all along. When I confronted them directly, the truth emerged in painful fragments. They'd helped Tyler create fake business documents, provided him with detailed information about my actual company, and even coached him on technology terminology he could use to sound convincing during phone conversations with Sarah. In their minds, they weren't enabling fraud, They were helping their son find love and financial stability. We thought if Tyler could just meet the right person, someone with resources and connections, maybe he could finally get his life on track, my mother explained. Sarah seemed like such a lovely girl, and she was so impressed with Tyler's success story. The argument that followed was unlike anything our family had ever experienced. I accused them of criminal conspiracy and child endangerment, pointing out that Tyler's addiction and fraud were destroying not just his life but their retirement security. They accused me of abandoning my family during their greatest crisis of caring more about money than blood relationships. The shouting reached a crescendo when Tyler blamed me for all his failures. If I hadn't been so successful, he wouldn't have needed to pretend to be someone else. If I'd stayed in touch and shared my wealth, he wouldn't have been desperate enough to consider fraud. Every poor choice he'd made was somehow connected to my achievements, making him feel inadequate. "You think you're so much better than us," he screamed. "You move to California and get rich and forget where you came from." Well, some of us can't just abandon our families when things get difficult. That's when my father collapsed. The heart attack was massive and immediate, dropping him to the living room floor while Tyler and I were still shouting at each other. My mother screamed for me to call 911 while she attempted CPR with shaking hands. The paramedics arrived within 8 minutes, but those 8 minutes felt like hours as we watched my father's face turn gray and his breathing become labored. At the hospital, while my father underwent emergency surgery, Tyler and my mother turned their fury entirely on me. According to them, my unannounced arrival and confrontational attitude had caused the heart attack. If I'd handled the situation with more sensitivity, if I'd approached the family problems with understanding rather than accusations, my father would still be healthy. "This is what your selfishness costs," my mother said through tears in the hospital waiting room. "Your father has been working himself to death, trying to solve problems you could have helped with years ago. All this stress, all this financial pressure, it's because you abandoned us when we needed you most." She demanded that I immediately pay for my father's medical treatment, Tyler's rehabilitation, and the family's mortgage payments. It was the least I could do, she claimed, to make up for 3 years of abandonment that had led directly to this crisis. Sitting in that sterile waiting room, listening to my family blame me for consequences of Tyler's choices, I finally understood that our dysfunction ran deeper than simple favoritism or neglect. This was a family system designed to protect Tyler from reality at any cost, even if that cost was my father's health and their financial stability. But I wasn't done discovering the full extent of Tyler's deception. The most devastating revelation was waiting in my father's office, hidden in a place where Tyler had never thought to look. My father survived the surgery, but barely. Triple bypass surgery at 55. The surgeon explained with damage that could have been prevented if he'd sought treatment for chest pains he'd been ignoring for months. Financial stress had literally been killing him slowly while he worked double shifts and ignored his health to pay for Tyler's escalating crises. During the long hours of waiting for him to stabilize in cardiac intensive care, my mother's accusations continued with relentless intensity. Every financial pressure, every health concern, every family crisis was somehow connected to my selfish decision to move to California without supporting my brother's emotional needs. "Tyler has been heartbroken for 3 years," she said during one particularly painful conversation in the hospital cafeteria. "He looked up to you so much, and when you just disappeared without explanation, it destroyed his confidence and self-worth. That's when the drinking got worse, when he started making poor decisions." According to this narrative, Tyler's addiction, fraud, and criminal behavior were all symptoms of abandonment, trauma caused by my departure. If I'd been a better brother, stayed connected, shared my success, none of these disasters would have occurred. "He's been trying to live up to your example," she continued. "Tyler wanted to make you proud, wanted to prove he could be successful, like his big brother. When you cut us off completely, he didn't know how to handle the rejection." But something fundamental didn't make sense about her timeline. If Tyler had been heartbroken by my departure, Why hadn't anyone tried to contact me during 3 years of supposed grieving? Why had my phone calls gone unanswered if the family was devastated by my absence? We tried reaching you dozens of times, my mother insisted. We sent emails, made phone calls, even mailed letters to your last known address. When you never responded, we assumed you wanted nothing to do with your family anymore. This was objectively false. I'd received no emails, no calls, no letters during my first year in California when I was still hoping to hear from them. But challenging my mother's version of events only made her more defensive and angry. Tyler said he tried calling you every few months, she said. He was devastated when you never called back. That's when he started saying maybe his successful brother was too important for his family back in Ohio. The conversation was interrupted when hospital staff told us my father was awake and asking to see me. The cardiac intensive care unit was a maze of monitoring equipment and hushed conversations with my father, looking fragile and vulnerable among the machines keeping him stable. "Brantley," he whispered when I approached his bedside. "I need to tell you something important." He asked me to bring him his reading glasses from his personal belongings, then requested I find his wallet and look inside the bill compartment. Behind his driver's license was a folded piece of paper worn soft from repeated handling. When I unfolded it, I found my original note explaining my move to California, the one I'd thought was thrown away with Tyler's spilled beer. "Your mother never saw this," he said quietly. "Tyler found it first and gave it to me. Said he was protecting the family from your selfish goodbye. I kept it all these years, reading it over and over, knowing you tried to explain but believing, Tyler, that you didn't want contact anymore." The note was exactly as I'd written it, warm, explanatory, including my new phone number and address, expressing love for the family while explaining my need for independence. It wasn't a rejection letter, it was a communication from someone hoping to maintain connection while pursuing separate goals. "Tyler told us you'd made it clear you wanted nothing to do with us," my father continued. "He said the note proved you considered yourself too good for your Ohio family, that you were embarrassed by our working-class background and didn't want us holding you back. But that wasn't the worst revelation." My father asked me to go to his office at home and look in the bottom drawer of his filing cabinet behind the insurance papers. What I found there would complete my understanding of just how thoroughly Tyler had isolated me from my family. The hidden box contained every birthday card, graduation announcement, and Christmas letter I'd sent home during my first 2 years in California. Dozens of communications I'd thought were ignored had actually been intercepted by Tyler and hidden from our parents. Letters describing my struggles and successes, holiday cards, expressing love and missing the family, even photos from my early apartment that I'd sent hoping to maintain connection. Each envelope was unopened but marked with notes in Tyler's handwriting. Another guilt trip from Mr. Success. More fake concern from someone who abandoned his family, Brantley, showing off his new life while we struggle. Beneath the cards and letters was a notebook where my father had been secretly recording dates and times when Tyler claimed I'd called and been rude or dismissive. According to Tyler's reports, I'd called home dozens of times during my first year away, but every conversation had ended with me being condescending and cruel. "Tyler said you called him worthless and stupid," my father had written. "Said you were embarrassed to be related to someone so unsuccessful. Called the family small-town losers and said you were glad to be away from us." None of these conversations had ever happened. Tyler had been systematically lying to our parents about my attitude and intentions, while simultaneously intercepting every actual attempt I'd made to stay connected. He'd created a false narrative where I was arrogant and rejecting while he was the loyal son defending the family's dignity. The final entry in the notebook was dated just 6 months earlier. Tyler says Brantley is probably married now, with a new family in California. Says we should stop hoping he'll ever want a relationship with his real family again. Sitting alone in my father's office, surrounded by evidence of Tyler's 3-year deception campaign, I finally understood the complete scope of his manipulation. He hadn't just stolen my identity to commit fraud against Sarah. He'd stolen my voice to isolate me from my family while positioning himself as their protective defender. Every guilt trip about abandoning them, every accusation about my selfishness, every claim that I'd rejected their love had been built on Tyler's systematic deception. My parents genuinely believed I'd been cruel and dismissive because Tyler had been feeding them false evidence for 3 years. But why had my father kept these secrets? When I returned to the hospital and confronted him with the hidden correspondence, his answer revealed the final layer of our family's dysfunction. I knew Tyler was lying about some things that he admitted. But your mother believed him completely, and challenging Tyler always led to such explosive arguments. It was easier to keep the peace than to confront the truth about what he was doing. My father had been complicit through weakness rather than malice, choosing family harmony over honesty, while Tyler systematically destroyed our relationships. He'd known I'd been trying to maintain contact, known Tyler was manipulating the situation, but lacked the courage to challenge his wife's favorite child. The heart attack, the financial crisis, the years of stress and overtime work, all of it could have been avoided if my father had found the strength to confront Tyler's lies and manipulation. Instead, he'd enabled the deception while privately grieving the loss of his older son's love and respect. As I sat beside his hospital bed holding the evidence of Tyler's betrayal, I realized that forgiveness would require a complete restructuring of our family's understanding of truth and accountability. The question was whether any of them were ready to stop protecting Tyler from the consequences of his own choices. The confrontation with Tyler, armed with the evidence of his systematic deception, was unlike anything our family had ever experienced. I returned from the hospital carrying the box of intercepted mail and my father's notebook, documenting 3 years of fabricated phone conversations. When I spread the contents across the kitchen table, Tyler's reaction confirmed his guilt more clearly than any confession could have. "You don't understand," he said, backing toward the door as if preparing to run. "I was protecting them from your arrogance. Every time you contacted us, it was just to show off your success and make us feel bad about our lives here. Tyler, these envelopes were never opened. You hid birthday cards and Christmas letters without even reading them. I could tell from your handwriting that they were fake," he replied desperately. "You were just pretending to care about us while you built your fancy life in California." My mother, seeing the evidence laid out before her, finally began to understand the depth of Tyler's manipulation. 3 years of believing her older son had rejected the family, 3 years of feeling abandoned and hurt had been built entirely on lies. The birthday cards, she'd never received the graduation announcements that never arrived, the letters expressing love and concern that Tyler had stolen and hidden. All of it contradicted the narrative she'd been living with. "Tyler, how could you do this to us?" she whispered, holding a Christmas card I'd sent during my first year away. "How could you let us believe Brantley didn't care about us?" But Tyler's response revealed the full extent of his entitlement and refusal to accept responsibility. According to him, he'd been protecting the family from my judgment and condescension. He'd been the faithful son who stayed home and cared for them while I pursued selfish ambitions in California. Everything he'd done, including the fraud with Sarah, had been motivated by love and loyalty to his family. "I stayed here while you ran away?" he shouted at me. "I took care of mom and dad while you were getting rich and forgetting where you came from. If I used your photos to meet Sarah, it's because I deserved a chance at happiness too." The logic was breathtaking in its narcissism. Tyler had convinced himself that stealing my identity was justified because his intentions were good, that lying to our parents was protective rather than manipulative, that fraud was acceptable if it might lead to love and financial stability. But my focus wasn't on Tyler's justifications. It was on preventing him from destroying Sarah's life. I had less than 48 hours before his scheduled flight to Chicago. where an innocent woman was planning to bring $50,000 in cash to invest in a business relationship with someone who didn't exist. Tyler, you're going to call Sarah right now and cancel this meeting, I said. You're going to confess that you've been lying about your identity, and you're going to make sure she doesn't lose her money. I can't do that, he replied. She'll never forgive me. This might be my only chance at a real relationship with someone who could actually love me. The conversation that followed revealed Tyler's complete disconnect from reality. He genuinely believed that Sarah could fall in love with the real him if he could just meet her in person and explain his situation. The $50,000 was just temporary borrowing that he'd repay once his life improved. The lies about his identity were just a way of showing his potential rather than his current circumstances. When he refused to contact Sarah, I took matters into my own hands. Using the information I'd found on his computers, I located Sarah's social media profiles and sent her a direct message explaining the truth about Tyler's deception. I included screenshots of my actual business articles photos proving Tyler had stolen my identity and evidence of his criminal intentions. Sarah's response came within hours, and it was both heartbroken and grateful. She'd been planning to quit her job and move to Chicago to be closer to the man she'd fallen in love with online. The $50,000 represented her life savings money she'd been prepared to invest in their shared future. My message had prevented not just financial fraud, but the complete destruction of her life plans. Tyler's reaction to my intervention was volcanic. He accused me of destroying his last chance at happiness, of being jealous, of his potential success, of caring more about some stranger than my own brother's welfare. In his mind, I was the villain who'd ruined his life, not the person who'd prevented him from committing a serious felony. The crisis escalated when Tyler threatened suicide, claiming that losing Sarah and facing criminal charges would leave him with no reason to continue living. This emotional manipulation had worked on our parents for years, but I refused to enable it any longer. Tyler, if you're genuinely suicidal, we'll get you professional help, I said. But I won't let you use suicide threats to avoid consequences for fraud and identity theft. My mother begged me to reconsider pressing charges, arguing that Tyler was sick and needed treatment rather than punishment. But I'd learned too much about enabling and manipulation to back down from appropriate consequences. Tyler will get treatment, I said, but he'll also face legal accountability for his actions. Those are the terms for any family reconciliation. The legal intervention came through Sarah's family, who had resources and connections that ensured Tyler's catfishing scheme was investigated thoroughly. Within a week, he was facing federal charges for wire fraud, identity theft, and attempted financial crimes. The evidence was overwhelming, and his public defender recommended accepting a plea agreement that included restitution probation and mandatory addiction treatment. Meanwhile, my father's recovery became the catalyst for honest family conversations that should have happened years earlier. Confined to bed rest with months of cardiac rehabilitation ahead, he had time to reflect on the patterns that had nearly destroyed our family. I enabled Tyler's behavior because confronting it was harder than managing the consequences he admitted during one of our hospital visits. I knew he was lying about many things, but challenging him always created such drama that it seemed easier to just keep working overtime and paying for his mistakes. But my father also shared something that changed my understanding of his silence. Hidden in his workshop was a scrapbook he'd been maintaining for 3 years, filled with newspaper clippings about my business success, screenshots of articles mentioning FlowKit, and photos of my achievements that he'd been secretly collecting. "I've been proud of you every single day," he said, tears streaming down his face. "I just didn't know how to tell you that while managing Tyler's constant crises and your mother's anger about you leaving." The scrapbook included a note he'd written but never sent, expressing his admiration for my independence and success, while asking forgiveness for his weakness in not standing up to Tyler's manipulation. He'd known the truth about Tyler's lies, but lacked the courage to challenge the family's dysfunctional dynamics. My mother's transformation was slower but equally significant. Confronted with undeniable evidence of Tyler's deception and manipulation, she was forced to reconsider 3 years of believing I'd rejected the family. The process was painful, requiring her to acknowledge that her protective instincts toward Tyler had enabled criminal behavior while driving away her successful son. "I thought I was being a good mother by always supporting Tyler," she said during a particularly difficult conversation. "I didn't realize that protecting him from consequences was actually destroying his ability to grow and change." The family reconciliation happened gradually, built on new foundations of honesty and accountability. Tyler, facing serious legal consequences for the first time in his life, finally entered legitimate addiction treatment and began the difficult work of taking responsibility for his choices. I established clear boundaries for any ongoing relationship. Tyler would complete his treatment program, make restitution to Sarah for the emotional harm caused by his deception, and maintain sobriety for a full year before I'd consider rebuilding our brotherhood. My parents would attend family counseling to address their enabling patterns and learn healthier ways of supporting Tyler without sacrificing other relationships. My father's medical expenses were covered by my resources, but with conditions attached. The money came through a trust fund that paid directly to healthcare providers and couldn't be accessed for Tyler's future crises. My parents would maintain their own financial independence while accepting help that protected my father's health without enabling further dysfunction. 6 months later, my father moved to California to spend his recovery time building a genuine relationship with me. Away from the toxic dynamics that had dominated our family interactions, he showed me the man he'd always been underneath the stress and enabling behavior. We spent hours talking about technology business and life choices, developing the father-son relationship that Tyler's manipulation had prevented for years. Tyler's progress was slower but genuine. Faced with real consequences and removed from the family system that had always protected him from reality, he began the difficult work of addressing his addiction and entitled attitude. The treatment program taught him practical skills for managing emotions without manipulating others, while the legal accountability ensured his progress was measured by actions rather than promises. My mother required the most time to change, but eventually began attending support groups for families of addicted individuals. She learned to distinguish between helping and enabling, between love and protection from consequences. The process was painful but necessary for building healthier family relationships. The relationship with Sarah had an unexpected epilogue. After Tyler completed treatment and made genuine amends for his deception, she agreed to meet him in person as part of his recovery process. The meeting wasn't romantic, she was dating someone else by then, but it provided closure for both of them. Sarah forgave Tyler while maintaining clear boundaries, and he learned that authentic relationships required honesty rather than impressive facades. 2 years later, our family dynamics had been completely restructured. Tyler was sober employed at a local restaurant where his manager knew his history and supported his recovery. My parents had learned to love him without enabling his poor choices while maintaining separate relationships with both their sons. The golden child dynamic that had defined my childhood was replaced by healthier individual relationships based on respect rather than favoritism. My success in California provided resources that helped the family rebuild, but more importantly, it demonstrated that independence and achievement were possible without abandoning people you love. Tyler learned to be proud of his brother's accomplishments rather than threatened by them, while my parents learned to support both sons in ways that encouraged growth rather than dependence. The most meaningful change was that family gatherings became genuinely enjoyable rather than exercises in managing Tyler's emotional volatility. We could celebrate each other's achievements, discuss challenges honestly, and maintain love that wasn't conditional on avoiding difficult conversations. My business success continued, but it no longer felt hollow or isolated. Having family relationships built on truth and mutual respect made every achievement more meaningful, while the lessons learned from our family crisis informed how I treated employees, partners, and friends in my professional life. The ultimate lesson was that love without boundaries isn't actually love at all. It's enabling that prevents growth and maintains dysfunction. True family support means caring enough about someone to let them face consequences, learn from mistakes, and develop genuine strength rather than manipulative skills. Tyler and I will never have the easy brotherhood that some siblings enjoy, but we have something more valuable: a relationship based on honesty, respect, and genuine concern for each other's well-being. He's learned to be proud of my success rather than threatened by it, while I've learned to support his recovery without taking responsibility for his choices. Standing in my California home today, looking at photos of family gatherings that include sober, responsible Tyler alongside proud, healthy parents, I understand that sometimes losing your family is necessary to save it. The 3 years of separation allowed all of us to grow beyond the toxic patterns that were slowly destroying our relationships and our individual potential. The success that started this story continues, but it's no longer the most important thing in my life. Building authentic relationships, supporting others' growth, and using resources to strengthen rather than enable, these became the measures of a life well lived. Take a moment to think about your own family relationships. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with someone you loved? What would you do if you discovered a family member had been systematically undermining your relationships while pretending to protect everyone involved? How do you distinguish between helping someone and enabling their destructive behavior? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with your own experiences with family drama manipulation or the journey toward authentic relationships, please like this video to help others find it. Subscribe for more stories about overcoming family dysfunction and building genuine connections. Share this with anyone who might benefit from understanding the difference between love and enabling. Thank you for taking this emotional journey with me, and I hope your own family relationships are built on the foundation of truth, respect, and unconditional love that encourages growth rather than dependence.